Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to the League Two Lowdown. My name is Jordan Richards. I'm joined by Luke Payne.
Hi, it's been a while. It's good to have this combo back. I'm enjoying this one. We've got something a little bit different planned today, so yeah, it should be
The
fun.
dream team as always. But yeah, as Luke has alluded to, we're bringing you something a little bit different. Of course, being FA Cup weekend, being round two, we're lucky that Grimsby and MK Dons will be playing in that cup coming weekend, and there's one League Two game on as well, which caught me by surprise the other day. But no, we sort of need something as well to sort of balance it. So we're not bringing you your typical preview show this week. If you are watching on YouTube, you might see you might see the tier list is back. I say lo and behold, sort of. I worded that horrifically. But the tier list is back. And of course, if you've read the title today, we are going to be somewhat ranking the every club's League Two season so far. Of course, you've got your grading system there: A, B, C, D, E, F. A being the highest, and F being the lowest, the most awful, really. Again, we're struggling for words in this sort of stuff, but we've got all the teams there. We're going to do it alphabetically, yeah, we've got to try and keep this under 50 minutes. So I know it's been quite hard on the few times that we could do this, but I think, to be fair, some of them are quite straightforward. I'm looking through it myself earlier. I reckon it's more than achievable. But just a quick, just your typical housekeeping stuff before we do get started. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if you are new on YouTube. Very close to 1,500 subs. Now, I think it was like under 20. I think last time I checked. We really want to try and hit that by the new year. So tell your nan, tell your dad, tell your dog, make an account, hit that subscribe button. It will be massively appreciated. Make sure you go and download the podcast as well, wherever you get your podcast from. I understand that this might be a little bit harder to listen to on your streaming platforms, but we'll try and simple it down as the best way possible, and we'll do a quick run through at the end. I think I've gotten through everything there. So without further ado, let's crack on. Accrington Stanley first up. Of course, like I said, we're going to do this in alphabetical order. Accrington Stanley coming up first. They've had a few results as of late. They just do what I expect them to do. They just pick up a few results. Didn't have the best of starts to the season, but they're just sort of doing and around it, don't they? They just sort of get the job done at times. I know they won the last recent game against Oldham. They're just very good at getting results at crucial times. So they're certainly not F. I'd probably argue maybe as high as D, but I wouldn't be against D personally, because ultimately this is sort of what I expected from them a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, with Accrington, the expectation was so incredibly low. I mean, I don't think any of us had them outside of the bottom two or three when we did our predictions and all the rest of it. So actually, if you're looking at the relegation zone, they're 5 points clear of that. They're kind of just off of the chasing pack in terms of all the promotion teams, which they're probably not going to be a part of. Let's be real. But they're doing all right. They're in a sort of solid position, and I mean, it kind of comes back to the whole thing of they're better against the good teams than they are the bad teams, which is a little bit of a concern. I would agree on D. I was thinking C or D because the expectation was so low, and actually they are surpassing that right now, in my opinion. So D is perfectly fair.
Yeah, and I can't really argue too much with that. I can maybe understand maybe some people to put them E, but again, from judging from expectation, they're in that ballpark of where I expected them to be at the start of the season. I think they'll do enough to. I don't think they'll go down. I think there's a few worse teams in them, but sort of around that area of the table, I think they can be pretty content with that. And like I said, they're just John Doolan just knows how to pick up results at good times and some really good results as well. They've had some good wins already this season. Yeah, I think D is perfectly fair. Right, Barnet up next. I think they've started off life in League Two quite well. I think if we'd have done this a month ago, I'd reckon you'd probably been looking at a B. But I think they've had a couple of draws. I think 5 straight draws in their last 5 games. I think we C. I think this could be. I was speaking to you at the start before we started recording. I've not really planned any of this. I just sort of anticipate there being a lot of teams in C, and I think the main reasons for a lot of them is the fact I think there's another gear to go for a lot of these teams, and I don't think they're as bad as D. I'm not quite sold on B yet. Although I've said for a number of times, I think they're the best team that Grimsby have played this season. But I guess it's easy to say on sort of recent form. But I think C is probably fair. Do you think? I don't know. Well, it depends what you think. But I think C is fair-ish.
I,
I know.
I'd say
I know you was impressed with him. But I just I don't know. He could make the argument for B. No higher though. I'm not putting him in A.
I think at the minute you'd have to say C. I think league position does come into it, but I mean, obviously it can't weigh too much into it because with how crazy this league is, they could be about eighth in a week's time, or something ridiculous. I mean, they're sat in 14th at the minute. You've said they're the best team you've played. I think they're the best team we've played. It's just they don't do that every single week, so we obviously can't necessarily put them too high, but they're in the mix, albeit at the bottom of that group of teams at the minute. But they're kind of just about where you'd expect them to be. If they fell any further, I'd start to be a bit more concerned. But I'd say it's a solid base to be able to grow from. So I think C is entirely fair.
Yeah, totally. And like I said, I think there's quite a lot. I think, like I said, I think with C, I think there's a lot of potential for teams to jump up a tier maybe in the next few weeks or so. But I'm just seeing what we have done this season. I think there is room for improvement. I think that's probably why they're in C. Barrow up next. I don't really know what to make of Barrow this season, truth be told. I think they've had some they've had a couple of positive results, but I don't think they've had anywhere near enough. They've had some good performances, but again, I don't think they've had anywhere near enough. I don't think they're the worst team in the league, particularly. I know their recent form has not been the best. Is it somewhat what we maybe expected this season where they are? Maybe, if we're going to be honest. I'm really torn. I mean, if you put in Accrington D, I don't know. You couldn't make a real good argument for E, to be honest. Again, I think it's between D and E.
I mean, I
I'm
was
torn.
leaning towards E, if I'm
I
being
won't be.
totally
Yeah,
honest.
I won't. That was my initial
It's the
thought.
difference in expectation as well. I was expecting Barrow to be quite a bit more solid, and don't get me wrong, defensively, they're reasonable. Their stats are comparative to the teams above them, but in terms of the goal scoring side of things, their stats are much more similar to the teams below them, and actually, yeah, I just don't think they're quite as strong as I'd expect them to be. Obviously, we kind of covered the whole having their midfield effectively decimated in the transfer window over the summer, but you're still expecting a little bit more than I think we've seen from them thus far. So I'd say I'm slightly underwhelmed. So I think I'd go with E.
I think they've got good pedigree for players as well, haven't they? And I
Oh yeah,
think
no,
some of
they
them
do,
have
100%. Yeah.
I don't think some of them have really quite hit the levels yet. But I guess you could say that for the whole team.
Well, yeah, exactly that. Like I said, defensively they don't look too bad. It's just, it's just, yeah, they're just not quite hitting that kind of momentum that I thought they would at this stage. It's still possible, of course, and I don't think they're going to get dragged into a relegation battle or anything like that. At least not at this stage.
Well, they're not far away from
But
it if you look at it
well,
at
yeah,
the minute.
I suppose. But I would still expect them to be able to turn it around, especially with someone like Andy Wing as well. You'd hope that they would be able to at least drag themselves away from that and at least sort of solidify in mid-table. But obviously, have to wait and see. But yeah, like I said, I'm just slightly disappointed with them at the minute.
Bristol Rovers up next. I think this is quite easy, to be honest. They're going straight in F. I think for the squad, they've got, the manager they've got, they should be nowhere near the position that they're in. Like I said, I think for the last few weeks, I don't think Darryl Clark is all the problem. And I think for the last few weeks, they probably, performance-wise, they've been really good. But if you don't take your chances in those games, you get punished in this division. And 8 defeats on the trot, I think, says everything you need to know. They had an awful start to the season. They had a period where they massively picked up. They went on a mini run, and then they've just struggled to buy a win ever since. And with the squad that they've got, we was all saying they were going to compete with lots of MK Dons and Chesterfield. They were going to be right up there challenging, and they've been so far off the pace, so far off it. And maybe it's just that warning signs for League One clubs that get relegated to League Two, because let's be honest, all of them are sort of around that position, aren't they? I mean, look, we looked at Bristol Rovers, and it was the ones that we expected that to happen to the least. But if anything, there's arguments that they've probably been hit the worst for one reason or another. Yeah, they deserve that. There's no excuses with the squad that they've got.
Yeah, spot on. Absolutely spot on. I mean, this was the team I put to finish, second in the league. These were one of like two teams I thought would be able to compete with us if we hit the heights that we're capable of hitting. Which also meant I had a lot of expectation for them. And I remember saying in the summer, like, the caliber of these signings, I'd happily have these in our squad. Like, but somehow that's not translated to results. I'm not entirely sure what the big problem is there. There's obviously a lot going on that we perhaps don't necessarily understand as outsiders to it, but only Newport and Cheltenham have conceded more goals than them this season. I mean, you think back to some of the games where they're conceding 4 goals, and I mean, yes, they did it to us, but there are other teams as well. Yeah, and then just the goal scoring with the players they've got there as well. You're thinking, okay, they should have goals in this team, but they just can't take their chances. There have been games they've controlled recently, but they haven't been able to convert any of their chances, so they've just lost anyway. There's so much to be concerned about there for whatever reason it's not working, and there's no real quick fix to it either, I don't think.
No, I totally agree with that. Bromley are up next, and again, I think this is quite easy. They're the first team that are going in a fantastic
Agreed.
season that they've had. They were top of the league for a brief period last week before losing to Walsall, but for Bromley alone, that is superb. A tough side to break down, excellent at home. They've been excellent full stop, really. Tough side to break down. Andy Woodman knows what he's doing. They've got a group of players that know exactly what they are. They know how to win games of football. They know how to hurt teams. And they've got some, obviously, we talked about that, some Michael Cheek and all that sort of stuff. Mitch Pinnock, I think, has been equally as good. Just a terrific job that Woodman's doing there, and obviously Bromley flying high in the table. They deserve all the credit and recognition that they get at the minute.
Absolutely, and we kind of went on about Michael Cheek a lot last season as well, and obviously he's a fantastic player, but it feels like Bromley is so much more than just that now. If you get what I mean, it feels like it's a much more kind of a much bigger sort of squad contribution. You look at the likes of
Swanley scores a header every week, doesn't he? So.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's that always helps if you can at least score a couple of set piece goals every week, and when your centre back's just scoring goals for fun. But as you say, Pinnock's been a revelation for them. And put it this way, no one plays Bromley and has an easy game against them. Yes, they can be beaten. Of course they can. Anyone can be. But you're in for a tough time when you play Bromley. And they've set that precedent, and they're up there. Ultimately, they're currently in the race for automatic promotion. Well, for the title essentially, because that's how close it is at the minute. And given how small their budget is as well, how they've been able to piece this together, Andy Woodman, as you say, has done an absolutely fantastic job. And yeah, I mean, full credit to that squad as well. I think they're doing a really, really good job, and it's going to be tough to stop them this year. I don't think they're going to drop off anytime soon, unless January hits them hard, but I don't think it will.
No, I don't see that being a problem compared to maybe some other teams. If anything, I think they'll probably get stronger. It's quite a frightening prospect, actually, what could happen with Bromley.
It is a little bit.
They deserve to be where they are. They've been terrific this season. Cambridge up next. Again, I think they're somewhat similar to Barnet. I think they're another team that I think should have more to give. We've mentioned goal scoring is a somewhat problem. Defensively, they're solid. You can't really argue too much about that. I think they've dropped a lot of points from not quite having I think a lot of their strikers have been injured for a fair bit of the season, to be fair. But other than that, goal scoring has clearly been a problem. I mean, they did pick up that good win at Crewe last week, coming back from behind. I think that's a real good result for them. A real promising one coming from behind as well. I'd probably argue C again, and yeah, I'd probably say just C. I don't think they're as bad as D. I'm not sure they're quite B level either yet. I just feel like there should be more to come. I guess maybe they don't maybe pick up as well. I think January could be a big month as well for them.
Well,
But
absolutely. I mean, I personally think they need more up front. But ultimately they've got the second best defensive record in the league, only worse than Oldham in that regard. But as you say, it's that final third where things don't necessarily go quite as well for them. I mean, I've kind of banged on about how I don't think they're quite good enough from open play when it comes to attacking, but then they are still a very strong set piece team, and that can carry them through games. Uh, I mean, they are sixth in the league as well. Like, I know everything's really, really close as things stand. So they could easily drop a few divisions with one poor result, but they're just in the mix, aren't they? That's all you need to be at this stage. You just need to be with the pack and then hit form at the right time. And at the minute, they're doing the right things to be able to do that. So I think it's hard to argue with C, really.
yeah, look, I think they're clearly doing something right. They're clearly solid enough. You know what Neil Harris is like as a coach. They're doing okay for themselves, but I think there's potential for them to get better. But saying that, that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, if you know where I'm coming from. Cheltenham's up next. If this was pre-Cotterill, they would be going F, or in fact, they might even have their own section. But obviously, since he's come in, I think the turnaround has been incredible. They've obviously brought in a fair few free agents that have helped them along the way. And my thoughts pretty much on Cheltenham since he's come in have changed quite drastically. Do I need to see more? Probably. I anticipate January being a massive month for them now that the takeover is done, and we've seen already the sort of backing that Steve Cotterill's already had with the free agent market. It could be a really exciting month for them. I think there's arguments to be made. You could probably put them as high as D, maybe C, but I think if you're probably looking at the other teams in there, I think probably not yet. I'm itching towards D just based on Cotterill alone, but it's also hard to not ignore the first sort of month or so when there were absolute bobbins. It's quite a it's between D and E, but I'm personally itching more towards D. But I guess that's somewhat with the hope of them continuing what they are doing. In which, to be honest, I feel quite confident they can do that. But
This
I
is this
guess if
this
we're
is the
looking at them, I don't know. I guess if we're looking
yeah.
at it from the season as a whole, at the moment, I guess that's where we've got to look at it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first one where I'm going to have to slightly disagree, at least just a little bit. I'm more leaning towards E at this stage. I mean, obviously the initial impact of Cotterill was fantastic. When you consider how far behind they were, they have caught up and all the rest of it. They are at least, uh, in that sort of mix of teams uh, that's a bit higher up the table. But then they are still down there. They still are 22nd. And I think the big thing for me is that they just don't draw games. They've only got only got two draws there, which for me is a little bit of a concern. They do still lose a lot of games. It's a case of they either win or they lose, and that for me is a concerning sign. They can't hold off teams quite as well as I'd like them to be able to. And don't get me wrong, Cotterill has had a fantastic impact so far, but it feels like it's kind of leveled off a little bit. If you see what I mean, I feel like they've kind of just gone back to that kind of inconsistent form, and it feels like to get away from that relegation fight, they do need that bit more. It wouldn't take too much in January, as you say, to improve those things. But as of right now, I still think they are firmly in the relegation mix. I don't think they're anywhere near away
Yeah.
from that yet. And although Cotterill's done a good job so far, there's still a lot more work to be done for me. So for me, they're still firmly in E.
Yeah, maybe I was more looking at it towards the future more than here and now. But I think now you sort of bring up those points, I think you somewhat do make a bit of a fair assessment. I do anticipate it getting better though, and maybe if we were doing this in a month's time and they picked up 2 or 3 more wins, then you're probably looking at D if they're much clearer out the relegation battle. I think they will be. I don't think that's where they'll end the season, to be quite honest. But I guess if you take the season as a collective, it's not always been coming up roses, really, is it? Far from it. In fact, with some of
Well,
the
yeah, I
backings
mean,
that they have.
they were the struggling team. They were the only team that was getting battered aside from Bristol Rovers. So yeah, there
Yeah.
is that kind of element to it.
Yeah, I think maybe on that argument you can't really. I don't think you can really complain too much, but I don't think it takes much. I think the same could be said for anyone, maybe other than maybe a couple. I don't think it'll take too much to really climb this, and I fully anticipate that being with Cheltenham. Chesterfield are up next. I'm going to start with you first because there's another one in which I'm really torn on, but I've got one clear place. I think you probably know where it's going to go, to be honest. But I just want to agree with it.
I mean, Chesterfield for me at the minute are a little bit of a disappointing one. We were going on about okay, yes, big three that we're expecting to do well: MK Dons, Bristol Rovers, Chesterfield. Chesterfield are currently, mid-table. They're in the mix, and don't get me wrong, one result takes them right to the top of the playoffs. But for me, there are just underlying concerns with the defence that I just keep coming back to, and I mentioned it in the last episode of the pod, and I believe we put a TikTok out about it as well. Go check it out if you haven't already. And actually, Chesterfield have the only teams that have conceded more than Chesterfield are 19th or lower. That for me is a huge concern. So yes, they can score a lot of goals, but it doesn't matter if you can't keep them out at the other end. You think back to Notts County a couple of seasons ago. I mean, they were scoring for fun, but the games were finishing like 5-5 or something like that. They weren't actually getting the results they needed to bring themselves up to the top of the table. And we'll pause for that. That's annoying.
So someone doesn't like your Chesterfield comments.
Yeah, it's just another Chesterfield fan. Yeah, it's
Yeah, no, we've had a lot of them in a minute.
for that one. Yeah.
My light's gone off now. It's all going on.
We're being haunted here at League Two Lowdown. That's what's going on.
I'll tell you what, this is good for the bloopers.
Absolutely.
That we've got going on. I'm so sorry. What a mess this has been. Who says we're professional? Right.
Oh dear. Where was I? Something about Chesterfield. It's just the amount of goals they concede. It's a huge concern for me, and ultimately, if you score loads but you also concede loads, you'll probably end up finishing mid-table. It's a case of, for me, January is absolutely huge for them. I need to see those improvements in defence to see that they can actually secure the results, not just a load of goals, but you draw a 3-3 or a 4-4 or something like that. I need to see this team, grinding out a few wins in a row, get themselves towards the top of the table, because I also think that's what the expectation is for that squad. They should be higher than they are. I don't want to see them towards the bottom of that chasing pack. They should be one of the ones leading the charge. They should be up there with us, with Swindon, with Walsall. The fact that they haven't ever really caught up to that group yet concerns me a little bit. Is probably all I'd say. I'd be leaning towards probably a D.
A D was that?
Yeah, D. I think there's a lot. There's the expectation for them is so much more than what they're doing for me, and I would like to see them really kick on. I think they could be doing a lot better than they are.
I think the grave expectation going into the season was they was going to be one of the teams to be. We was all looking. Obviously, MK Dons were going to be that team, but I think the next in line was probably Chesterfield. Also, a lot of goals scored, a lot conceded. Of course, there's pros and cons to obviously both of them. I mean, ninth is not horrific, and it only takes a couple of results to get them up there. But I can totally see where you're coming from. I'm not against a D. I'd probably have them as a probably C, but right at the end. Probably.
That's fair. That's fair. I can settle for that.
But I'm happy. I'm somewhat happy to go with you. Probably more so than Accrington there. Probably at the front of D. I think. I don't think they've probably been. Yeah, I get where you're coming from. I think the jury's out on quite a few things. They need to bolster that defence in January. I know you've mentioned it, but it's a simple. Was it another five goals conceded to Doncaster in the cup? Probably. There's probably a lot of rotation. In fact, no. I think I saw Shea Dunkley was playing in that, and I think that's quite concerning. If he did, I'm actually going to check that real quick. I know it's sort of running over. Their defence that Grimes, I don't think Grimes plays a lot, but I think Dunkley does, which is a somewhat problem. Yeah, like I said, they've already got one coming in. They certainly need more, but I think they've been too hot and cold at times. Probably not so much at home, but I probably did expect more from them.
It's the underlying problems, isn't it? There's grinding out results and staying with the pack that way, or there is sort of there's sort of using your quality to get you results in some capacity, but you're not actually performing well, and it doesn't look quite as sustainable. I don't think Chesterfield are sustainable in their results at this moment in time.
No, totally agree. Right, next few are probably the hardest of the bunch, I think, these next few, but we're going to run through them really quickly. Colchester, they've had a very, very good month. Probably the best team in the league for the past month, I'd probably go as far to say, but it wasn't that always plain sailing. But I don't think they were necessarily bad in their games for a lot of them. I think, like I said, a couple of weeks ago, I think some of their biggest problem was maybe themselves at times. And especially at home games where they've had loads of chances but couldn't quite put them away for one reason or another. I think that's changed quite drastically over this past month. I think everything is starting to click, and I'm somewhat prepared to sort of brush that aside because they weren't necessarily getting battered in their games. I'd probably if we're putting Chesterfield as a D, I'd probably put them C.
Yeah, I was immediately leaning towards the C with Colchester. As you say, if this was a month ago, they'd be going easily lower. But it kind of feels like they've had that eureka moment of, okay, we've kind of got our rhythm, we've got our flow, we know what works for us now, and they've found a way to make things work, even with one or two big players missing. So, if they can carry on in that vein, then it sets them up quite nicely. They don't lose too many games. I know Chesterfield also haven't lost many, but it's the underlying side of things. I feel like Colchester can go to any team and grind out a decent result, whereas with Chesterfield, I feel a bit more uncertain. So for me, Colchester have a better foundation that they're building on, and they're one that could easily kick on into those sort of higher positions in the league.
Yeah. Crawley Town are up next. I think this is quite straightforward. I don't think they're quite good enough for D. I don't think they're as bad as F. I think E is probably fair. I think they have picked up one or two results recently, but again, I think it's a case of I want to see more, but I don't think they've been as catastrophic as maybe the teams in F, certainly Bristol Rovers, because again, if we're sort of looking to start of the season expectations, did we probably expect Crawley around there? I don't know, somewhat. I think is probably the fair answer. Maybe a little bit higher than what they have done already, but I think if you looked at it, I know you weren't impressed with their squad going in, or that impressed with their business, I should probably say, going into it. And I do think it's somewhat reflective, but I do think it has got a little bit better recently, but I don't think it's much.
Well, yeah, as you rightly alluded to, I wasn't particularly impressed with what they did in the summer, but they're kind of like roughly where I expected them to be, but they have also looked probably a little bit more competitive most of the time than I thought they would be. At least in this sort of like last month or so, they've at least kind of found ways to make themselves tricky to play against. Obviously they raised their game against us. That was kind of an emotionally charged game anyway, but they've done it against some other decent sides as well. I think there's signs that they could potentially start to rise up the league a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a lot, but they could easily drag themselves away from that sort of relegation scrap. That's for sure. Whether they will or not, it obviously remains to be seen. And consistency is the big word of League Two, isn't it? Really, and they are one of the teams that have struggled for consistency the most. I'd say they are very, very hot and cold. I think there's potential for them to rise high, but I think E for now, at this moment in time, is probably just about right.
Yeah, Crewe Alexandra up next. I think they've had the best of both worlds, haven't they? They've had good spells in the season and they've had some not so good spells. I think recently, they have had a good spell. I know they lost the last game to Cambridge. I think they're middle of the road. Again, I think there's room for improvement, but I think at the minute it's not going. I fancy them, obviously. I think we're probably comparing a lot of these to Chesterfield now. Now we've put them in D. Are they better than Chesterfield currently? I'd probably argue yes. So I'd probably put them C.
Yeah, I'd say Crewe are probably just about bottom of C.
Yeah, just middle of the road, aren't they? I think maybe, but the potential's there, I guess. But also the potential's there to obviously drop down because we know what Crewe are like at times, don't we?
Oh, on their day, they've looked like one of the best teams in the league. It's just they've also looked like one of the worst teams in the league at times as well. So they're also one of those teams that don't draw many, which is always a concern for me. If it's a case of you either win or you lose, and that's kind of it. I do always have that little bit of concern that there's some kind of underlying thing that could be problematic, but it looks like they're on the up at the minute. So I'd say bottom of C is probably fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Fleetwood, I think away form has been a problem a little bit. Home form, not so much. They've been good at home. They're a side I do need to see somewhat more of, I think, at times, but I think they're getting there. I'd probably put them high D, personally.
I'd say that's probably just about fair.
I think
I was kind of
there'd be probably another one in which probably lower C.
they're kind of like in that kind of gap in between. You almost need like a category in between where it's like a team that's kind of halfway between C and D. I think with Fleetwood, I mean, their stats show it again. They're just the most consistently inconsistent team, which is exactly what they were last season as well. I think it was a case of, they'd what won like a certain amount of games, drawn like one less, and then also lost one less or something like that. It was something along those lines. Their stats were so evenly matched. I think they'd scored the same amount of goals as they'd conceded, and this season statistically they're very close to that as well. They've won 7, drawn 5, lost 6, scored 27, and conceded 26. So in terms of progression, there's not been much, which is probably why I lean slightly towards B. But they are capable of challenging on their day. It's just, if they want to actually progress more as a club, there's obviously going to need to be some kind of positive impact somewhere along the line. So I'd say D's fair for now.
Right, here's an interesting one coming up next. Gillingham. Obviously started the season well, went on that long unbeaten run. I feel like things haven't been the same since Gareth Ainsworth took that leave to have his operation. Obviously, results-wise recently haven't been the best. And I think that's probably knocked him down a tier for the last month or so. Maybe because you were easily looking at least, at the start of the season, it was probably an A, but I think it's tough to call, really, isn't it? I'm torn with this one.
I'm kind of somewhere between B and C with them. I think the Ainsworth thing had a big impact.
More high school. I'm looking at there's a couple of teams there I think will go in B. I think have made more of an impact.
Yeah, I'd say that's probably just about fair. I mean, statistically, they are looking like a solid side. It was just the mental impact of not having Ainsworth with them, and I think that does count for a lot of it. Unfortunately, I mean, obviously in the coming weeks we'll find out whether that was the case because he's now back, isn't he? So we'll be proven right or wrong with that one very very quickly. But there's certainly the makings of a very good side there. They are certainly capable of grinding out results. They've got the exact same record as Chesterfield in that regard, actually 7 wins, 7 draws, 4 losses. But it's the underlying side of things that I think is a lot more impressive with Gillingham. Only conceded 20, scored 26. Yeah, I just think they look a lot more solid to me. Top of C is probably fair for now, but I don't think it'll be long before they're back up into B. If things go how I'm expecting them to go.
Right, we're 35 minutes into this and we're already halfway through. let's speed run through these because we're on to a bit of a strict time. Quite a difficult one next time with Grimsby, my team. It's probably the wrong time to do it. Results-wise, the past month hasn't been great. Performances have been good on the whole. I still stand by that. I think we've been the better team in 85-90% of games, and I think it's fine margins. I think it's just constant mistakes that are just punishing us. But I feel like it's something that can be rectified. I don't think it's a huge issue. If we maybe get into the next few games and it starts to be a big issue, then it could be a different conversation. But I'm having us in C every day at the minute. But I understand that the results. I mean, I can't quite judge it on performances as they've not been brilliant, as the performances have been okay last month. But obviously, in a results-based business, results haven't been. But I'm confident it'll improve at the minute. And I think this is somewhat, we're still in and around that. I think a few good results gets us up that table quite easily. And I think we're more than capable for it. I'm putting us in C, personally.
Yeah, I'd agree, to be fair. I'd say bottom end of C at the minute just because of all
bottom
the
end.
mistakes. But yeah. But, ultimately, if you weren't making the mistakes, you'd be much higher up than you are currently. So I think that's all it is. It's a case of if you eradicate those, you're in a much more solid position. And that's something hopefully you can address either in the coming weeks or in January. So, for now, it's a solid position. And yeah, I think C is just fair. You're just kind of in the mix, and there are signs, but not just also slight issues that need fixing.
I know I was a bit reactionary on my TikTok after the Tranmere game, but I think when you look at it at the bigger picture, I don't think it's as big as the biggest problems I think I've sort of made out to be. But Harrogate are up next. I know they've struggled with injury for a lot of the season. Obviously, they've had very small squads in there, but ultimately they're down there. I don't think they're as bad as F, but I'm struggling to give them anything more than an E, to be quite honest.
I do think it has to be E. I would agree. Yeah, I mean they did relatively well start of the season, didn't they? They obviously fell off a little bit.
They're capable of getting some good results. We've seen that from them, but I guess like I said, there has been circumstances to this.
Yeah, I think it's just this whole injury thing's messed them up a little bit. But then again, statistically, they don't look too bad. Like they've conceded less than most of the teams around them and scored more than quite a few of the teams around them as well. So it's a case of I think there is a world where they can be quite easily pull themselves out of this, assuming they can sort out whatever's going on with this whole injury crisis. I don't know who's back when and all the rest of it, and how much of that they can fix in January. Obviously, with the option to bring in more players and all the rest of it, if they have the budget to do so. I don't think they're doing too badly. They're not too far off the pace, whilst they're in probably the biggest struggle they could possibly have this season in terms of an injury crisis. So I think there's potential for them to improve. So E's there.
Your boys MK Dons up next. Personally, they'll be the first team that are going in B. I think they're getting there. I think results-wise have suggested that. Did I maybe expect a little bit more at the start of the season? Absolutely. But I guess there's also been a few injuries, isn't there? But I don't think they're far off an A. I just don't think they're quite there yet.
That was pretty much what my assessment of us was going to be. I mean, I obviously thought we'd do well this season. I still expect us to do well this season. I just also didn't think we were going to run away with things from the start, because obviously, it's quite a large turnover of players, all the rest of it, plus all the injuries. It hasn't been plain sailing as much as, it's not dreamland. we are very much in the reality of League Two. But we're in the right mix at the minute, and I think the next few weeks are going to be very telling. 7 of our next 8 games are against teams currently in the top 10. And I think, end of December, beginning of January, that's where we'll start to get an idea of where we're really at. But it does feel like we're slowly starting to find a rhythm. Players like Mendes Lang are suddenly starting to look very match sharp. And that's obviously going to make a difference. And obviously Aaron Collins, I keep going on about him, he's back. So that could make a difference. So for now, we're in the top 3, which is the bit that matters. That's where we need to be. But if we can kick on and get to the top of the league and stay there, then even better. So top of B is absolutely fine for now.
It's the bottom side. Newport up next. I mean, look, this is where I sort of expected them to be. Obviously, now onto their second manager of the season in Christian Fuchs. You can't not give him an F, I think, for the season. Really, can you?
They're 5 points behind.
There's not been a great deal of scraps to feed off in general, really.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, 5 points behind, 22nd, conceded more goals than anyone, haven't won a home game since March. That's kind of all you need to say, really. They're an obvious F.
It does look like that Christian Fuchs is somewhat getting them back to basics a little bit, but obviously 2 games played is not very much a big sample size, is it? Notts County, I think they've exceeded expectations somewhat to what we expected them at the start, haven't we? I think Notts County are always that side in which they fancy themselves to be up there. But I think, obviously there was a lot of questions about Martin Patterson, and rightly so, but I think every week he's starting to prove more people wrong. I'd put them B.
Yeah, I'm agreed. And looking at them, even just statistically, actually, they're very similar to us. It's just we've scored a few more. They look a very, very solid side. They're tough to beat. Yes, they've had 1 or 2 results here or there that look a little bit questionable, but so has quite literally everyone else in the division. So it doesn't mean
teams are always going to have that.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're in the right mix. They're exactly where they need to be. And the performances look solid enough as well. I think, yeah, as you say, it's an easy B.
Oldham Athletic, I don't think they're doing. I think they're coming along quite nicely. I think for their first season back as an EFL club, there's some good stuff to them. Like defensively, they're brilliant. I think they're the most. They've got the best defensive record, haven't they? Obviously, goals have been a problem at times, but they've been getting some results here and there. And they do look a strong outfit. They're another side that are tough to beat. I'd probably put them D though, to be quite honest. I think they're probably another side in which I think more could be done, maybe. And they're another side in which I'm curious to see what January brings. But I feel like this is somewhat what I expected from Oldham, to be quite honest. I think they're somewhat living up to what I expected, to be quite honest.
They've kind of matched expectations, but in quite a kind of roundabout way, like not the way we expected them to. They have the best defensive record in the league, but also one of the worst strike forces in the league. Yeah. So it's kind of like which one kind of counts for more. I'd say top of D, bottom of C is kind of where they are. I'd say based on league position, probably bottom of D at the minute, just because goals are such a big problem.
I'm just looking at C in general. I guess you can somewhat make the case. I think they're somewhat similar to Cambridge in periods, but I do look at some of the other teams in C. I just think they're better off than them at the minute.
Yeah. I'd say that's probably fair. It's a case of with Oldham, I still feel like there's a lot of work to be done in January. Or just find a way to get Kane Drummond scoring goals. That would be nice. But yeah, they've obviously got the Mellon combo, manager and son striker manager combo. But beyond that, I don't think they have much.
There's another one for the bloopers.
Oh yeah.
I'll tell you what, we're all on them today. If you're watching this on YouTube.
Oh gosh, yeah, no, it's
Salford. Oh no, Karen, sorry.
No, it's a case of with Oldham. I just think there's a lot more that can be done to fix it. Obviously, if they can get more goals to fix that sort of issue, and then they keep their defensive performance up, then suddenly they look like a huge threat. But until then, they're kind of just a middle of the road team that's not going to do too much. They're just going to be a little bit annoying to play against.
Salford City up next. I feel like I expected a little bit more, to be quite honest. They've had some good results, and they've clearly been up there at times. I think you probably are looking towards a C. I think it's maybe a case of that result of the Saturday against Crawley might have helped them get that little bit. I think if we'd recorded this a couple of weeks ago, I think I'd maybe put them D. I think C's fair though, but I don't think it's as spectacular as maybe some others.
Yeah, I'd say bottom of C purely based on league position. There are underlying problems there for me, like the fact that they are the only team in the top 16 with a negative goal difference. which definitely shows they're not as solid as perhaps they should be. They are capable of grinding out results, but in terms of, I know everyone's had poor results here or there. I feel like Salford's poor results have been worse than others, if that makes sense. Like there have been some really, really poor games with them that really do concern me. So based on league position, I think that's enough to keep them just about up in C for now. But I think there are certainly issues there that need to be resolved in the next month or so.
Shrewsbury, I think, are going in E for me.
Yeah, reasonable enough. They're kind of just, they're just in the wrong mix of teams. Kind of what we expected from them, I think, just about, but still a little bit disappointing. With the players they've got as well, they are slowly starting to improve, but whether it's enough, not sure. I think there is certainly more that could be done, but yeah.
They picked up a good few results at home, haven't they? I know. I mean, look, buying wins, I think, at all has been a problem for them this season. Is it somewhat what I expected at the start of the season? I somewhat expected Shrewsbury, I think, to struggle more than, maybe Cheltenham. I had Cheltenham lower off, didn't I? I think in my predictions, but I expected both of them to somewhat struggle, and I guess it's sort of have been at the minute. Like I said, things do look like they're improving a little bit, but I again need to see more really before I make a full judgment. Swindon Town, they're very good. I don't think they're as good as Bromley, though. I think B is fair. I think there's a couple of issues. I think defensively, I think they could do with some work. I know that results-wise haven't been incredible for them recently. I know they picked up that good win at Chesterfield the other day, though. I think they're another side in which I don't think they're far off, but I just don't think they're quite there.
Yeah, they're a tricky one. For me, they are the only team that could possibly be in A alongside Bromley, possibly. But then I do also see top of B potentially as well. They obviously score a lot of goals. Yes, they concede perhaps more than you'd like them to, but at the same time, they are good at grinding out results. They've only lost 4, which is, that's joint best in the league alongside us and Bromley and 1 or 2 others. I think they're one of the more impressive teams thus far, especially when you consider expectation, all the rest of it. I think they're doing well. There's definitely an argument for them to be bottom of A, but top of B is equally fair.
3 minutes, 2 teams. Are we agreeing at Tranmere for D and Walsall for A?
I think Walsall are top of B as well. To be honest,
At the top, I can't put them. No, I think they've got to go. I think they've got to go A personally.
Fair. I personally disagree, but
I mean,
I know they're top of the league and all the rest of it, but it for me it comes back to the whole, they either win or they lose. Obviously, they're winning a whole lot more than they lose, which is perfectly fine. But
they've not really lost a lot of games, though. Really, have they? They've not lost a great deal.
They've not dropped many. It's just I feel like, I feel like there's a slightly more sustainable sort of edge to, Swindon, Dons, not at the minute. There's not much in it, but personally, I'd have them in B.
And I think if you're probably looking at early season expectations as well, I think we all sort of thought that Walsall would drop off a little bit because they lost a lot of players, and we'll have to see what this new batch is doing. And you could probably argue they've exceeded them. In fact, you can more than argue that.
In comparison to what we thought they'd do, they've definitely done better. But then I think you could say the same for Swindon. So,
but
I think they're very similar in terms of where you place them. So for me, I'd say top of B. But
I just think Walsall have dealt with it slightly better at the minute. Not to say that Swindon have done a bad job because they haven't, but that's just my gut feeling. Tranmere, were we saying D?
D. Makes sense. Yeah. There's not really much to add on them. That's just kind of where they are. They score a reasonable amount, just concede too many, problems to be fixed. But they're kind of somewhere in between. And there's more that can be done there, but it's definitely a project. It's gonna take a couple of months to sort things, but yeah.
Right, a quick run through from whoever is listening on Spotify or on Apple, we'll go from bottom to top. In F, we have Bristol Rovers and Newport County. In E, Barrow, Cheltenham Town, Crawley Town, Harrogate Town, and Shrewsbury Town. All the towns of them Barrow there. In D, we've got Tranmere Rovers, Fleetwood Town, Oldham Athletic, Cheltenham, Chesterfield, not Cheltenham, and Accrington Stanley. In C, we have Gillingham, Barnet, Colchester United, Grimsby Town, Cambridge United, Crewe Alexandra, Salford City. In B, MK Dons, Swindon Town, Notts County. And in A, we've gone for Bromley and Walsall. This was a lot of fun. We're expecting a lot of stick. These are good.
I'll definitely get some after the Walsall comments.
Well, I'm on the Walsall hype train. Probably not as much as Harry putting it out there the other day. They're saying that they're going to get promoted. I'm reserving all judgment until January is out the way before I say anything of the sort. But I respect him
exactly what I said.
I respect him for his brave comments, but I think we're all. I think even Walsall fans have been quite sceptical of that. It's like, well, hold your horses. Let's calm down for now. This has happened before, but no, I've been full of praise with them, and yeah, I don't think I certainly justified some of these really well. I know probably Luke has, but let us know your thoughts. It'd be great to hear him. And thanks for tuning in as always. Like I said, like, subscribe, comment on YouTube, download the podcast wherever you get it from. Let's hit 1,500 subscribers at the end of the year. That would be hugely appreciated. We'll be back for probably another ramble. I know we did one a couple of weeks ago for the FA Cup first round. It was probably my most enjoyable pod of the season. We'll probably do that again. Just sort of comes to mind, really. Just a bit of a chat, like you do at the pub, really. But yeah. Thanks for tuning in as always. Really appreciate your support. This has been Luke. I've been Jordan. This has been the League Two Lowdown, and we'll see you next time.